Welcome to Kenzie's Crimes. This week we are going to be focusing on the Delphi murders. Now these are pretty infamous. They happened in Indiana. Have you ever heard of them?
I have not. Born and raised in Chicago, I've not heard of this stuff.
Which actually does surprise me. So Delphi is a really small town in Indiana. Actually, the downtown itself is just like a few blocks, but it's really, really beautiful. Tons of farmland, very serene. One thing they are known for is their Delphi walking trails, as well as the Monon High Bridge. The Monon High Bridge is a railroad track that's suspended really tall above water. So it truly does live up to its names. A lot of people love to go there, take senior pictures, graduation photos, and things like that. It's a beautiful area. So Abigail Williams lived in this small town of Delphi. She was 13. She went by Abby. She was known as just loving, angelic, one of those really kind-hearted girls, kind-hearted soul. Her best friend was Liberty German. She went by Libby.
That's a pretty name, Liberty.
Isn't that really cute?
Yeah.
Now, she was also from this small town of Delphi. She was 14. And now she was like the spunky, hilarious, described as absolute life of the party.
She was the Kenzie.
Yeah.
She was the Kenzie.
Just really, really sweet friends. Now, on February 13th, 2017, Abby and Libby were dropped off at those Delphi walking trails that I had previously told you about. Really common, especially in a small town. Imagine getting dropped off at like a mall or things like that. Yeah. There isn't a lot going on in this tiny town.
Sure.
Those Delphi trails were very popular for teenage girls. She's not going alone, right, to go on a walk. Again, this is a small community. Everyone feels like they really know each other, right? So they got dropped off and they were supposed to get picked up around 3 p.m. by Libby's father. Okay, so they're having fun for just a few hours. When he got there, the girls were not there.
As a parent, that is, oh man, okay.
And of course, he gave it a second, right? A teenager is not always the most punctual in the entire world, but it didn't take long. The search party kicked off at 5:30. So he's supposed to pick them up at 3. And the search party for these two girls starts at 5:30. Now, a lot could have happened. This is a small town, again, where a lot of people felt pretty confidently about their community. These are more so concerns about, did they fall off the bridge? These are girls maybe screwing around. Did somebody fall off a bridge? Did they hurt themselves? Did one hurt themselves? The other tried to help? Are they lost on the trails? So they didn't know what they were getting into with these search parties, and not sure what they're looking for. Of course, also teenagers. Officers sometimes go, is it a runaway thing? Now, their families were pretty confident. They love being home. They love being there.
No matter what, every parent's worst nightmare.
Absolutely. So they were looking for these girls. Now, it was the very next morning. So again, this search party kicked off at 5:30 p.m., February 13th. Okay. Abby and Libby's bodies were found the very next day, and really the next morning. So it didn't take long.
Valentine's Day.
On Valentine's Day. Foul play was suspected, and the homicide investigation began. Now, February 15th, this is 2 days after they initially went missing, right? Officers released a picture of a man on the Monon High Bridge. That is that really tall railroad track we talked about. They say they're looking for this man, and it's somebody that they want to talk to. Now, keep in mind, this image was it almost had like a security camera like look to it, which they're out in a nature trail. So everyone's like, where'd they get this picture? Why do they want to talk to this guy? Like, where did this come from? It turns out that the picture came from Libby's phone.
She took the picture.
It was off of her phone. She took a picture of a man. He had on blue jeans, a big blue jacket, and then a hat. I'm not describing you. I'm sorry. I just thought about that. But the hat was more like kind of like a fisherman-ish hat. Yeah, kind of like that. Yeah. He was looking down so you couldn't see his face, but obviously very strange for them to take this picture. Yeah. Now the audio that they released was a man saying, "Get down the hill, get down the hill." So she went to take a video. Now, not a video of him saying it to their face because she was trying to hide it. So they have a picture. This happened very much out in the public. There were people on the trails that day saying that they felt like they did see Abby and Libby. So there were eyewitnesses, not necessarily to the crime, but to seeing the girls. They know that the time it happened. You would think they'd be able to get in on this quickly. Not so much. So let's start circulating Their first big suspect was a man named Ron Logan, okay? The girls' bodies were found on his property, but just to clarify, right, very incriminating, that's never, not a good sign, but the girls' bodies being found on the property, the Delphi trails butted up to his property.
That makes sense, yeah, so
it wasn't like, oh my gosh, they were driven to this other location or anything like that.
It could have been a coincidence.
Right, but because of this, they were able to obtain a search warrant for his land. There were also, even though it wasn't the murder weapon, which we are going to get into, there were also unwrapped bullets found at the scene of the crime. Do you know what an unwrapped bullet is?
I'm not a big gun person, so no.
And so I wanted to clarify kind of the second I started talking about it. So unwrapped is usually when there's one in the chamber, you cock it and one falls out. So it wasn't fired.
Okay, right.
You see people do it initially, you see unwrapped bullets. In this scenario, probably in an effort to scare somebody or use it as a threat. So in the search warrant, they wanted to see this man owned a gun, right? He owned 156.
Well, he's in the country, yeah.
He's in the country. It doesn't make you a criminal by any means, but he had 156 of them. He also lied about where he was at the time of the murders.
Why?
And they figured that out, right? So now it's like, oh, very incriminating. However, the reason that he lied is because he was driving on a suspended license. He was driving illegally at the time. And so we didn't want to tell the officers because we wanted to get in trouble for that. However, it made him a suspect.
Almost like two coincidences. You live on a trail and you were lying about your suspended.
He also was super in front of the camera. He was part of the search parties initially. He was interviewed by a few of the news outlets, and I believe it's because he cared about his community.
Yeah, right.
You know, he really cared.
Yeah.
But that has been a tactic of people previously, was, you know, looking right in front of you, so to speak, right? He did get ruled out because once they went into his illegal driving, they could confirm his alibi, but he did end up getting in huge trouble for that. So another man from Peru, Indiana, had a fake profile using a male model and went by the name of Anthony Schatz. He used this profile to talk to underage girls, like young girls, and solicit inappropriate images of them. The real name was named Keegan Klein. Officers claimed that fake profile was in contact with Libby the day of her disappearance. Keegan claims he doesn't remember that at all, and kind of, to be brutally honest, he was talking with so many girls, it wasn't like, oh, I remember talking.
Underage girls.
Underage women. He was talking to Libby. He did offer up DNA and really anything else that the officers wanted, because basically, like, I'm a bad person, but I did not murder, like, that's not what I was doing.
Right, okay.
He currently is in prison.
Good.
I believe he got 45 years.
But not for the murder.
But not for the murder. October of 2022. This murder happened in 2017. There was finally an arrest. Richard Allen.
Who's this?
Right. People were shocked because there has been no information about this man previously, right? Think about it. We're aware of other suspects. People were aware of other people, like the two that I just listed. And this did have a cult following, this case.
I'm sure, a small town, and
There's actually a podcast called the Down the Hill Podcast. It's an entire podcast that followed this for years and years and years for super in-depth dive. I was able to get some of my information from that because they've done a really great job. So people were really shocked because they're like, who? Yeah. And also not a suspect, he was arrested, right? So this is crazy. So Richard Allen was 50 years old. He had no criminal history. He was a farm tech at the local CVS. Everyone in Delphi knew him, even if they weren't like hanging out with him.
You know everybody, right?
Yeah, you knew him he was the guy at CVS. He'd been there for a long time. He had a successful 30-year marriage. He had a daughter. He was beloved by his neighbors. Like there was a man on the news, like, I adore my neighbor. He goes out of his way to talk to me. He's so kind. And he actually printed out memorial pictures for the families at the CVS. So you go to Walgreens, CVS to print out photos.
Yeah.
He's the one who printed these photos because that's where they went. Richard Allen admitted to being on the trail and the bridge the same day and time as those girls. And he claimed he really very well could have been wearing that outfit. The blue coat, the blue pants, the hat. I'm sorry. Yeah. I should have told you about that. I'm sorry. It was also reported that he confessed over 61 times after being arrested, not previously, but after being arrested, to inmates, officers, his wife on the phone, his mother on the phone. He kept spewing out, I did it, I murdered them.
Can I ask a question about this?
Yes.
how did they find this guy in the first place? Like, where did he come from?
Basically, this case maybe didn't always have the best police work, and sometimes I don't blame officers because it's really hard, I think, when you're from a small town and
Small town police department. Okay.
You're not expecting these huge, everything in life takes practice. I think, this is my theory, so disclaimer, Ron Logan was somebody that they were very hot and heavy on right away because the girls were on his property, he lied about his whereabouts, he had guns, and I think it was distracting. It turns out that a police report was filed right when the girls went missing. Richard Allen admitting, I was on the trails, this is what I wore, things like that. And it kind of got filed away. I don't know who brought it back up and was like, did we ever talk to the guy who said he was there and kind of fits the age profile? And
he just confessed.
And he did not confess then.
Oh, okay.
So they then started circling back with him. Okay. One of the really incriminating things for this man, besides being there at the exact same time and all those things, and his voice somewhat matching the recording, that is tough because somebody could alter their voice while being recorded. They could have been using, or they could have deepened it like to be threatening or something like that. Yeah. The unwrapped bullet found at the scene of the crime. When you unwrap a bullet, when a bullet's shot, it leaves a specific print. Now, some people claim those prints are as identifiable as a fingerprint, and you can really limit it down to the exact gun. Some people say that's not as accurate, but it does leave a very distinctive mark. So the unwrapped bullet found near the girls, even though a bullet was not the cause of death, and we're going to get to that because that's another key piece of evidence, it not only matched the gun that Richard Allen had at home, like the .40 caliber, those kind of bullet, it had the same marking.
Oh, okay.
And again, some people saying that's as identifiable as a fingerprint.
Ding,
now,
ding, ding, ding. Okay,
technically, could he be the most unlucky man alive and he unwrapped a gun near there earlier?
The unlucky guy was the guy who owned the land next to the trail.
Unlucky also.
Had 160 guns.
But playing, a truly devil's advocate. Now, when he was confessing in prison, his defense team heavily leaned on the fact that he was starting to lose his mind in prison, doing things like washing his face in the toilet, eating his own feces. I know, really, really aggressive, banging his head against the wall. So these are not valid.
They're saying he's crazy.
He is losing his mind. He's in solitary confinement some of the time. He's just losing it. This is, this can't be incriminating. You can't use that. His defense team, when this came out, actually shocked people because, what are they going to say happened, right? What defense are you going to take? They came out and said that this was not Richard Allen. It was actually a pagan cult of the branch of Odinism sacrificing these young girls.
That was the defense?
That is what the defense team claimed. Now, you can't take everything lightly. You can't go, that's too crazy, because if it did happen, you can't do that, right? What if that's what happened? They're saying that there were sticks and things arranged on the girls' bodies. They're also saying the placement of the bodies, because there was no drag marks and things like that, made it seem like more than one person was involved. There's no way he could have done it. There was also other incriminating things in the way of it seemed like their clothes had been maybe put back on after murder because there wasn't blood all over their clothing. Things like that they were like, it seemed ritualistic and that's what they're hanging their hat on. However, the judge decided they were not allowed to bring that to the jury in court. So it was out to public information. You knew that they were not allowed to introduce it to the jury. Now let's talk about what was allowed in court. So the voice recording that we talked about earlier, down the hill, such a short snippet. Apparently, it was actually a much longer clip that the jury got to hear, over 40 seconds long.
Really?
Where you can hear one of the girls saying, "Don't leave me up here with him," and being really surprised.
Whoa.
Him walking up to them saying, "Get down the hill." They have to piece out some of the words. It's obviously not the world's most clear audio.
Right.
They hear the mention of a gun. So they believe that he approached them maybe with a gun in his pockets. And in that photo, which we've been popping up, it looks like he's kind of like he's hunched over. Maybe he is hiding a gun or things like that. What was also allowed in court is the information about the unwrapped bullet being basically a fingerprint on the site. Right. You want to say that his confessions in jail weren't valid because he was losing his mind, which is an important thing to look at. However, Richard Allen was able to give some extreme details about the crime scene that weren't released. So a lot of times, especially with minors, they don't release all the gruesome details. Those are things that, get brought up to a jury, of course, but you don't need everyone speculating, trying to share images, trying to do this out of protection for the girls, the families, also swaying a community prior to a court date is really important. So you want to hide all of that information. Richard Allen was able to describe the weapon, which was a box cutter, which had not been released to the public, and how he disposed of it. And this is really important. This is why I really brought up Ron Logan more than once. He also said that he got spooked initially with his initial plan and kind of had to change course. And I'm not going to talk about some of those details because they're even rougher, but he changed course because a van drove by. It matches the description of the van as well as the exact timing and alibi of Ron Logan driving.
The illegal driver.
The illegal driver, and that was his property. So if these confessions were false, it's a lot of coincidences that he's able to bring up these details that, once again, were not released to the public. Now, I will say there was no DNA evidence of Richard Allen at that scene, but over 6 years later, when it comes to DNA being in your car or things like that, you've had time to get rid of it. And there was no electronics linking him to the scene. You also hear no digital footprint is kind of when people describe that. So no cell phone towers or anything pinged them there. So there is a way to say you can't 100% be like, this was him, this was their DNA, his DNA was found on them and vice versa. You don't have that. However, finally, November 11th, 2024, so pretty recently, Richard Allen was convicted to 130 years in prison.
Good.
He got 65 for each murder. There is many people who feel like there's missing pieces of this case, and I can agree with that. There's a lot of people who feel like more than one person did it.
What's missing for you?
There's a lot of evidence, and it could be just what are the odds that some things play out, but there's so many people and experts saying how could he have done it by himself. There's no drag marks to where the girls' bodies are and things like that. It is weird because he did arrange sticks and things on their body. And what is the answer to why he did that? This is a man with no criminal history.
He's still alive right now.
Has a daughter. He is alive right now. It's just like, why? What was the There's just some missing pieces here, and this paganism. Like, not that I think it's that. I think that seems like a lot. But where did that come from? So I totally agree that we are missing puzzle pieces, but I definitely think it could have been him. And I'm sure there was even more information that was released in court that could have been more information.
I think it was definitely him. I mean, he confessed to it too. Like, it's him.
You feel very confident in that. I do want to put out there Abby and Libby. There is a memorial park for them, Abby and Libby memorialpark.org. It's in Delphi. It is a gorgeous park, like softball fields. It's family friendly, and you can donate because it's like a local community park. So if you do want to donate it to it, Abby and Libby memorialpark.org. It really helps, obviously, keep them alive to their families, their community, and they get to continue to be a positive influence as they were when they were alive. And I also just want to say out there to people, we've talked about so many of these in Kenzie's Krimes. You just really have to be careful. You know, these wooded areas, these hikes, it doesn't matter how comfortable you are with your community. And even if you're like, oh, I'm going with one other person. Well, if you meet somebody who that's their intention that they have a weapon, I think it's really important to go in truly groups, not just one person, right? But also bring mace, bring a taser, bring something to protect yourself. Bring your husband, but bring something with that, because even if you're with one other person and somebody else is prepared to attack you, it is so dangerous. Just it's never worth it. Never get too comfortable in those settings. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Kenzie's Krimes. Our thoughts and prayers are with Abby and Libby's family. Please, again, Abby and Libby memorialpark.org if you want to donate. And if there is a crime that you would like to bring awareness to, please message us and let us know.